So I'm going to turn it over to our fearless and wonderful leader, Reverend Devon Crawford, to bring us welcome, to give us prayer, and to center us as we get ready to start this hour, a little bit over an hour that we'll spend together talking about and hopefully gleaning from you all, what does it mean to be a welcoming community, both as a community of faith, like our literal institutions, but also welcoming in the community. Our goal really this evening is going to be that we begin to help Multifaith EMI to suss out a strategy and not strategy, a kind of manifesto of what it means to be a welcoming faith institution that is partnered with us. And you all will help us to do that, as well as to talk about the policies in our communities, state and federally, that stand against the welcoming community and how we combat those, as well as dream together on some proactive and just radical imagination around what a welcoming community could look like. So I'm passing it over to Reverend Crawford.
Thanks so much, Deirdra, for convening us, and to Katie Jones and all of those who are with the Multifaith EMI team who've helped us to bring together not only this conversation tonight, but the series of conversations that we've been able to host since July. In the spirit of Freedom Summer, the spirit of those who came together 60 years ago, who are committed to freedom, committed to democracy, committed to creating a better world for all of us, particularly those who are in the United States who've been fighting, struggling to create a world that has been really marked with slaveocracy, marked with a legacy that is built upon violence in so many ways. And we have come together in the spirit of those freedom fighters who fought against the norms of violence, who fought against the systems of segregation and separation, who fought against systems of incarceration and slaveocracy, to really imagine it and to really bring into fruition what freedom ought to be and could be for all of us, especially the least among us. It's great to see everybody here. Great to see those who are part of the Multifaith EMI board. I see Bruce Turnbull, who's on the call, all of those who are tuned in from across the country, and grateful for Pastor Raphael Warnock, who is our founder in this movement. We've come together at such a time as this, in this peculiar moment in our history, our collective history. We're gathering a little bit 2 weeks after a national decision, a national election, in which we witnessed a national choice, which this country has decided to go with respect to the presidency and the executive branch. Now, we know that this is not a partisan space. We're not facilitating a partisan space, but we do want to acknowledge the very real impact that will come as a consequence of the incoming administration and the incoming leadership of our country. And it's not so much that we're gathering to reflect on uncertain times, but it is a level of knowingness and certainty with respect to the ways in which and the threats that will impact justice impacted folks among several vulnerable members of our community. And there are many reports that have been done with respect to the impacts that the incoming administration will have with respect to justice impacting siblings. I believe the most comprehensive resource that all of us can review is Project 2025. That was produced by an organization known as the Heritage Foundation, which was brought together with several consultants from think tanks and groups that represent the interests of this incoming administration. And you'll see the ways in which the expanded use of the death penalty, expanded use of sentencing, the ominous threat of restoring the rule of law and order, the ways in which stop and frisk will be targeted to impact the most vulnerable among us. This is something that is going to happen that will impact all of us, particularly justice impacted siblings. And so with this moment, we know that this is a moral moment that when we think about 59 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took his final fight for freedom. He was killed fighting for garbage workers who were struggling for human rights, who were struggling for their dignity. And a year after his murder, his final book came out entitled Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And we're still wrestling with this question. And our nation has made a decision. There's been a national decision that has stoked much chaos amongst all of us. That we should not ignore the level of apprehension and anxiety all of us have been feeling, particularly in the last 2 weeks. But your decision to be here, your decision to create community in the midst of chaos is a choice that gives all of us a bit of hope, I think. I think that all of us, because you decided to log on to this call, should give each of us a little hope, because hope isn't something that you can measure or say that if you do certain things that it's going to transform overnight. But our decision to come together to try to change something makes the difference. That's what's going to hold us together. I believe that's what's going to sustain us and ground us amidst what we know, because there's a lot that we know that we will have to face and that we will have to struggle through in the things that we don't know. But I think what is certain that we can remain faithful to are the communities such as this that can ground us, connect us, and hold us, especially when we're dealing with the challenging times such as this. So we can begin with a moment of prayer, and then I'll pass it back over to Deirdra to facilitate our conversation on welcoming communities. Won't you pray with me at this moment? Gracious and most loving God, we are grateful for this community. We're thankful for the decision, the choice to come together amidst uncertainty, amidst challenge, amidst chaos, to create beloved community. Community is a radical act that can help us not only survive, but thrive amidst moments of violence. Violence is a lazy choice. The choice to love, the choice to engage in nonviolent resistance, which at the heart of it all requires community, is a struggle. It requires strength. And those of us on this call affirm the strength to love and the strength to be a community that values the particular divinity in each person on this call and each family that's represented on this call. So we ask that you would embolden us, strengthen us, give us the focus and the vision and the energy to do the work that we are called to do. Give us the compassion to welcome with radical arms and radical hope your beloved children, our siblings, to see yourself in the eyes of someone else, especially in this season, which brings with it much grief, brings with it much reflection, much joy as well, a season with mixed emotions as we center ourselves at the end of this calendar year. We thank you for the facilitators. We ask that we would be enlightened, that something would be implanted in our consciousness that would inspire us to go forth and be your lights in this world. It is in your many names that we pray and affirm this prayer. Let all those who agree say amen. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Deirdra. Thank you so much.
Got it. Welcome again, everyone. At the same time that I told the folks who are working in the back that I was like, oh, I'll do my own PowerPoint presentation. And then I remembered that I forgot that I don't know how to do PowerPoint. So we're gonna do this together. Like let us pray again, and that Deirdra figures out how to make this thing work. So I'm gonna share my screen.
Deirdra, I can also do it if it's helpful.
Let me see if I can start this slideshow. Let's see.
Got it.
Let me see. I see slideshow, but I don't see how to start it.
I think if you go top right, next to share, like super top right corner of your screen, way over. Keep going.
No.
If you click that.
I think I'm gonna come down and let you do it
Okay,
because
I got you.
I forgot that there was a deal with like the way in which the bar, so that I can't see. Yes, we'll go to slide 2. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, good evening, you all. Let's start. Let's see if we can start. Yeah, the slideshow. Now I see the slideshow. I see it on yours, but I'm not sure if you can see it. I mean, if we can start the slideshow. Today we're going to really start this conversation or continue the conversation around like, to me, this is an unconference moment. For those of you all who were in Dallas, and how the ways in which we operated during the unconference was really to give the space back to the participants to talk to us about, we would frame up a idea and then we would go into small groups so that you all could, enlighten us with your own lived experiences, with your stories, with your genius around each particular issue. And so, as we think about this idea of welcoming communities, both again, our faith institutions as well as our broader community, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes framing this up for you all just to get us all on the same page. I am a believer in decentralizing leadership, but a part of decentralizing leadership also has to do with making sure that everybody starts with a level of a baseline of information. And so we're going to go through a few slides to kind of just center us and ground us in the idea, and then we'll spend the rest of the time in small groups so that you all can talk to each other. There's one thing that I forgot. There's two things that I need to say. One is the sacred act of naming, that we believe in that, and then secondly that before, if you are in Dallas, or even if you weren't in Dallas, one of the things that one of the pieces that we're trying to also implement is making sure that you have a little time to reflect before you start talking. And so we'll go through the slides. We'll spend 5 minutes where you can reflect and go into our Padlet and write for yourself. So you'll write and reflect around the questions. We'll give you a little bit of time to go and read what other people have written and then make comments on what they've written, or just give them a heart. Like, if you believe in it, you can heart it, like it like that. Consensus building, and then we'll break down into small groups so that we can actually articulate what we've and ideate on what we've all thought about. So let's get started. Today, as a result of nearly 5 decades of punitive criminal justice policies that have led and fed the mass incarceration system, 2.3 million people are in prison in the United States. 70 million, which is 1 in 3 adults, will have a criminal record. 95% of the people in state prisons will re-enter our communities at some point, and more than 640,000 people are released from prison each year. Staggering. So just breathe into those numbers and what they mean for our individual communities. Next slide. So today we're going to deal with, again, the two ways in which folks who are coming back into our community from the carceral state, from being justice impacted, how are we welcoming them? Welcoming is our word, or how are we ensuring that they don't come back to our community just to survive, but to thrive? Reuben Miller, in his book, Halfway Home, Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration, had some very strong, good, naming wise. So he talks about the collateral consequences or the civil penalties for having a criminal background. He also refers to it as a carceral citizenship. And it's defined as an alternative legal reality with a set of perverse rights, responsibilities, and formal and informal exclusions, which impact a person's ability to feel a sense of belonging in this nation, in their community, and with their families and in relationships. And I'm going to add in churches. That was a direct quote, but like in faith institutions as well. When he talks about those social, economic, and political barriers, they look like this list, right? Voting and participation in jury selection, receiving public assistance, working in certain occupational fields, receiving occupational licenses, attaining student financial aid for education, living in public housing or access to affordable housing, obtaining driver's license in some states, becoming adoptive and foster parents in some places. And then those to speak to those informal exclusions or those informal things. He talks about forms of punishment like granting the public access to the criminal record for free or for a fee, and how that fosters shame, isolation, and then also and then prompts for discrimination in employment, housing, and education. And that speaks directly. I put this value statement here because like that is against our values, right? Like the values that we purport. And so as you're thinking about this idea of us naming what it looks like to have a more equitable and welcoming community, how do these things either square or are dissonant with the values of your faith as well as your faith community? And then as you're thinking about what this looks like, both imagination, but then also reacting directly to what how these punishments and exclusions play out in our community. Next slide. So faith-informed welcoming. Next slide. We're looking to create faith-informed welcoming. So as it relates to our faith institutions themselves, we have a unique opportunity as faith institutions and people of faith to guide the creation and the strengthening of welcoming communities, both inside, those are the things that happen outside in the community, right? But also inside of our faith institutions. And so we wanted to name those things, name how as a faith institution could you be more welcoming in your practices and in the ways in which you show up, every Sabbath, Sunday, etc. Right? So one is to provide resources. Many of our congregations and our faith institutions already do some kind of charity work, right? And the ways in which we talk about this work is, from my perspective, is from moving from charity to justice. And so charity is our first response to oppression. Say that again. Charity as faith traditions should be our first response to oppression. It should not be our only response, but it is the way in which we can see and be proximal to the pain of people. So if we have food banks, if we have, some congregations and faith institutions offer affordable housing. They've built their own, they've built their own housing. We've got clothing banks. Some of us have counseling centers, whatever we have, whatever services we're offering to the broader community, have we taken a look at those services with a keen eye to how we can be more impactful for those who are just as impacted? And if we saw that, looking at that last slide, right, where it shows all the ways in which policies are and systems and structures are, curated and systematized to exclude justice impacted people as they come back into our community? Are there ways that we can proactively take the things that we naturally do in our faith institutions and zero in and say, and ask the real question, how can we do these things in support of folks who are justice impacted? The second concept or guiding principle would be humanizing language. And we talked about this in Dallas, right? We continue to talk about it and, sharing that part. But we've talked about we've heard from justice impacted people how words like felon, inmate, ex-convict, criminal, further defines, can serve as a barrier to demonize and further punish them. And so has your faith institution adopted new language around justice impacted people? And how are you sharing that both inside of your ministries as well as with folks as a part of your consciousness raising and learning? Third is, as you're thinking about the infrastructure and like the ways in which you want to become a more welcoming, whether you're creating a welcoming community or you're strengthening your community to be more welcoming, what is the role of justice impacted people in the decision-making process and in the listening and learning as you're doing that work? So are you talking to folks? We at Multifaith EMI, on the board level and leadership, continually say things like, we want to center the voice of impacted people. We want to center the experiences of impacted people as we think about decision making. How do you do that, both through storytelling, but very intentionally? So it's not just anecdotally, like, oh, I heard this or I heard that, but like, how are you inviting justice impacted people to the decision-making tables and helping to support the development of your thinking around whatever policies or procedures that your faith institution would like to implement? And then fourth is sharing the space for participation. So, the best way to explain that is like moving from transactional and consumer-driven relationships with folks who are justice impacted to transformational community building and belonging. So again, when I think about, even my own congregation, if I'm doing an assessment of my own congregation and think, how are we being welcoming? I can talk about all of the charity work that we do. I can talk about like, oh, we give this or we go here, but is that just a transactional? Is it just a transactional relationship, or is it a transformational relationship? Not just about gleaning information, number three, like decision making, but like, what roles? Like, I want to, like, if we believe that all folks have gifts and talents, how are justice impacted people encouraged to bring their gifts, talents, their expertise, not only to the decision-making process around welcoming communities, but all of the work that's happening inside of your faith institution? And then finally, the fifth is how we connect all of this work that we're doing, both sincerely moving from charity to justice. So like, how are we connecting our decision making, our experiences through participation, the use of language, as well as the transformational ways in which we're looking at resources? How are we using all of that as participatory research and as data collection and story collection so that we can inform the policies that happen both internally and externally? And so when I think about just going to visit decision makers, right, on the local level or on the state level, and even on the federal level, they see these big numbers. 640,000 people are going to get released every year. That's faceless. And you can do anything, you know what I mean? It's faceless, it's nameless. One of the gifts that and the tools that congregations and people of faith can deploy in the policy realm is being able to tell the stories, both of the transformational changes that happen with your congregation or with your faith institution because of the policies and practices that you all adopt, become as a welcoming faith community, but also as you're doing this work, being able to say like, hey, we serve X amount of folks through our food bank. And out of those folks, this many are just as impacted. And this is what we've heard from them. And that's why we want you to change the policy in this way, because we have a story, you know what I mean? Like we have a through line and we have direct contact and work with real people, and we know what this looks, like we know whether this is a regressive policy or whether it's an affirming policy. And so being able to connect all of these things that we're doing back to policy creation and the policy fight is the final, guiding principle for us. So next slide. So inside our own institutions and houses of faith, moving from charity to justice, we're about to get ready to reflect on, one, do you consider your institution to be welcoming? What examples do you have of welcoming practices? What internal policies and or practices have you and your faith, your faith institution adopted that anchor your commitment to being welcoming? That's the set of questions that I want you all to kind of mull over as we get ready to go into small group. But before we go into small group, I want to do one case study. Next slide. Around Durham, North Carolina. So what is a welcoming, what does it mean for a community, especially at this moment, to adopt welcoming practices? And so we looked at Durham, North Carolina. Next slide. This is a statement from the mayor of Durham that appears in their welcome home package. And it says, reentry is hard. There's no way around that. People might have a lot of expectations for you. You might have a lot of expectations for yourself. Be fair to yourself. It will take a long time to build the kind of stable life you want for you and perhaps your family, but you are not alone in this journey. And that's in the welcome packet for folks who are re-entering into Durham, North Carolina, and it comes from the mayor. Next. So what is, and you all will get all of these slides as well as our toolkit for how to go and have a conversation about how to be more welcoming in your faith institution. So what did Durham do? So the background for Durham is that the city of Durham looked at recidivism and said 76.6% of this came directly from their website. So I did not want to change their language. They say prisoners, we say returning siblings are rearrested within 5 years. 700 people return to Durham from state prison every year, and nearly 3/4 of those that are returning from state prison to Durham are African American. So they had done all of this research prior to starting this pilot program. Many of them struggle to find work, homes, basic necessities, and on average, 25% re-enter the justice system within the first 100 days after release from Durham County Jail, and 46% re-enter after 1 year. And so Durham had done this, like this good analysis of like who's coming home to Durham, not looking at, the 640,000 people who come home every year, but like who comes home to Durham. And they said every year, 700 folks come home, and then 25% are back in the justice system within 100 days. 46% of them are back within a year, and they wanted to stop that cycle. And so the mayor's office put together a task force. They called it an I-team to understand what was happening. They interviewed justice impacted people. They interviewed service providers and employees, and then law enforcement and criminal justice advocates. And from those interviews, from those surveys, they came up with a policy and how they would implement what they had heard. Like, what's the why? I'm still on that one. Go back. What's the why? So they started a pilot program called the Welcome Home Program, which included a peer support system. So they hired peer support specialists because what they heard from justice impacted people was that it was hard to come home, and they wanted someone who also had a lived experience that was similar to theirs to help them to navigate their way home. And so they started this peer support specialist program where folks started to contact folks even before they left the carceral state, built relationships with them, brought them home, welcomed them home, and then helped them to navigate finding housing, finding a job, et cetera, et cetera. And then they also in this program had a partnership with faith leaders and a faith coalition that helped to support caregiving packages and also supported building a community around folks who were justice impacted who were coming home. The results of the first year of the program is that they welcomed home 130 residents. Only 9 individuals ended up re-entering into the criminal justice system. 91% of the residents avoided recidivism. 83% of the participants to the local reentry council and the local service providers, and 200 as of April 2021, 268 residents have gone through the program, and 95% of them hadn't returned during those first 100 days. And so what I loved about this was that they saw a problem that 25% of folks re-entered into the justice system within the first 100 days. And then they not only started this pilot program to see if they could have an intervention and funded it, right? But they also on the back end could say how successful they were with those interventions. And so this is an example of what a community could do that I wanted to just highlight as, again, we're going into the radical imagination. That's my next slide. It's a lot of words all over there, but anyways, I don't know what happened to my slide. So what we're going to talk about in small group is what should welcoming home look like for EMI partners. We want you to get into radical imagination. So even those first slides that I showed you all the barriers, right? Like all the barriers through both policy and practice in communities that exclude folks from coming home and having what they need to not only survive. I mean, we're not even talking about thriving, we're just talking about surviving. But what I want us to do as we have this time to reflect on what this would look like is I don't want you just to go and say, how do we help folks survive and just apples to apples? How do we help them to survive? But I want you all to get into a space of radical imagination, like get into a space of dreaming and saying, what could we do if we came together as communities of faith and fought for better policies that help to support people who are coming home? So dropping in the chat. And what we're dropping in the chat is we want everybody to write in this Padlet. So we're dropping the Padlet in the chat, I hope, so that you all, and it's super, super simple and easy. You'll see the question. You'll see the questions. There's 8 questions. Read the questions. find a question that you want to, a question or questions that you want to dig into. All you do is hit comment and start writing and then post it. We're going to take 5 minutes for people to be able to write. Do y'all see the Padlet? Courtney just dropped the Padlet.
Where did he drop it?
In the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Y'all see it? I'm gonna. Vanity Jenkins also just dropped it in the chat.
Okay. What are your instructions again? Try to answer all
So
of
all
it?
you do is click on it. When you click on it, it'll open up and you'll see the 8 questions.
And you
When
want
you
to
see the 8 questions, read the questions, and all you have to do is click on the question that you want to answer and start typing. And then when you hit the little icon, it will post your answer so that we can just start to get I want everybody to spend some time and just write before we talk. And then once we get 5 minutes to write, I'll give you another few minutes to read what other folks have written so you can see that. And then we'll break down into small groups and we'll start to talk it out together around like how do we see the welcoming community. We're back. I hope everyone had an awesome time. We had 30 minutes to talk. We got a lot. First and foremost, thank you all for unmuting. I'll see how Leslie Anderson did over in her group as well. But we had a lovely time talking through some of the questions, but in an iterative way. So like in a way in which, just we heard from one person, heard from another person, and was able to just kind of build off of each other. And so I feel like we've got some great notes from our small group around what are the issues, housing. I got a whole bunch of notes and I can't read all of them right now, but like rights restoration, some of the things that we can fight for, how do we help to support congregations in their consciousness raising and in their education. So as houses of faith that want to be a part of this work, but are have a learning curve around what this issue, the issue of mass incarceration, how is it systemic, how do these systemic barriers impact the individual lives of people, and then how can they be a part of it, that we've got to do, that EMI could be a catalyst in helping to support congregations and faith institutions and really delving deep into that work so that they can be prepared to both realign their institutions' service and supports in ways that are congruent with what needs to happen in real time, as well as being able as power players to then support the policies, both local, state, and nationally, that help to upend the system of mass incarceration. And I'm going to keep saying that because I've been in a little bit about me for folks who are new to this call. I am a 25-year veteran for community organizing. And what I know for sure is that we can say one person at a time, but when you have any system that is oppressing people, you will have, what was that number we started with? 640,000 people who are getting released every year. And so, as in the spirit of abolitionists, right? As an abolitionist, that's who I am. You need the Harriet Tubmans of the world. Like you need the Harriet Tubmans that's saying, how can I save individual lives from the slaveocracy that we find ourselves in? But then also you need the Frederick Douglass. You need the policy change that indicts the issue of slavery and the system of slavery and says that we need to abolish slavery. And so it doesn't work either one. It's not an either or. It has to be a both and. And so what I love about the Multifaith Initiative to End Mass Incarceration is that we're trying to hold the whole of both of those things, of saying how can we be impactful both through our faith institutions for individuals who find themselves in the carceral state, but not stopping there and saying, but unless we change the system, we will be a cog in the wheel. So thank you all so much for the time that you have spent with us this evening, helping us to shape our welcoming communities language and our tenets for what a welcoming congregation or a welcoming faith institution should look like and be transformatively, as well as what policies you all will be willing to fight for over the next and upcoming time. I see folks throwing information in the chat. We have several ways for you to be connected, both to us as Multifaith EMI through our mail system and through our app. Many of you all who have, for folks who came to the UnConference, you're on the app. For other folks, feel free to drop your information in the chat so that folks can grab it and you all can stay connected, because it is about not only staying connected to the organization, but also staying connected to each other and beloved community. And so finally, as we hit the 8 o'clock hour, I'm going to pass it over to Devon to give us our final closing, and we will see you all next. Well, actually, we won't see you until January. We hope that you use the month. You will get an email from us that has a template for welcoming and some conversation pieces that you can use back in your faith institutions. But we're asking you all as an action step to really review that and go back to your faith institution and do some welcoming work over this time period. This is, traditionally November, December is a time of celebration and a time of community building. And so use this as a catalyst for the ways in which you all end the year. So we thank you all so much for signing up and coming. Devon, Reverend Crawford.
Thanks so much, Deirdra. And again, much appreciation to you, to Katie, to Vanity, and to the entire team that is responsible for bringing us together, keeping us on this call together, and for curating this space. And for all of you who've contributed on the Padlet and in the small groups. This is the kind of work, the necessary work. It's the slow work that's necessary to build beloved community, to deepen our consciousness around the issue, how we show up in it, and how we can effectively advocate and activate our communities around ending mass incarceration. This is a moral moment in our history for each of us. It's a decision for each of us to show up on these calls and to commit our time, to commit our talent, our thoughts, and our energy towards pushing us towards what we ought to be. That's the ethical mandate, what we ought to be, how we ought to relate to each other, the just relationships that we establish with one another, and how we demonstrate love, how we demonstrate that type of unyielding generosity towards one another in ways that are compassionate, that help us to be human. And so hopefully these conversations, these Hush Harbor conversations, help us to really grow into all that we are called to be as advocates, as people of faith, as people who continue in this tradition of abolishing a carceral system, a slavocracy that ensnares too many of our siblings. And so I'm grateful for all of you. We'll come back together in the new year. Our next conversation, I believe, is scheduled for February. We'll probably do something before that as we open up the new year in January. But we have a freedom conversation in February, focused on the death penalty. So we want to encourage all of you to come back for that. And in the interim, as Deirdra shared, let's practice what it means to be a welcoming community. Let's practice all of these kind of tenets and the kind of resources that have been shared over the past few months with respect to unlocking the vote and being civically engaged. We just went through an election cycle, but we have more elections coming up. There's 2026, there's 2028. There are all these intervening opportunities for us to be engaged and to educate folks on policy issues in ways that we can engage our communities more effectively. Thinking about ending solitary confinement, ending bail fines and fees. There's so many ways that we can educate, conscientize our own neighborhoods, our own communities, our own circles. And this is a time for us to practice that and to be able to come back to this kind of grounding, this kind of shared space to strengthen each other. So we look forward to seeing you again till we gather again. I just want to leave you with this final blessing as we log off and go to our respective spaces. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sunlight of the divine gently grace your cheek, and may rain gently fall upon your fields. And may God keep you in the hollow of God's hand. Until we meet again, go in peace and do the work of freedom. So thank you so much, and we'll see you again.
Thank you all so much. Have a great night. And
All right,
we're sending
all
out
right.
these notes and all of the things. So thank you all so much. We can't wait to do work with you. Continue to sojourn. Good night.